volume or in 2 volumes by Udbodhan Press that is following a particular chronology. Here it does not follow a chronology. So we have conversations recorded in 82, 83, 84, all scattered, and they are published in the different 5 volumes of the Ramakrishna Kathamrut, and this is the literal translation. So this is on April 4th, 1884, April 5th, 1884. So, and the topic that has been given, because there is some discussion going on about Ram's household life. So they have been talking quite a long time about Ram's household life. Ram's father is a staunch Vaishnava, and Sridhar, Sri Krishna, Sridhar is the name of Sri Krishna, is worshipped in his house daily. His father married a second time when Ram was very young. The father and stepmother lived with Ram, but Ram was not happy living with his stepmother. She is now 40. Ram is sometimes cross with his father because of his stepmother. This is the topic of conversation today. So though Sri Ramakrishna normally did not talk about social issues or anything to do with the household, mainly the talk was about God or anything to do with God. Other than that, you will hardly find any conversation in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. But somehow, Ram has introduced this topic. I mean, he's discussing about his father, which is not a very good thing to do because there are other devotees as well. But he's so upset with his father. So Ram is saying, my father is not the good man he was. I mean, obviously after marrying marrying for the second time. So Ram is openly telling this fact. And then Sri Ramakrishna tells the devotees, do you hear? He is of course taunting Ram. He says, do you hear? His father is not good, but he is. I mean, he is taunting him, saying that he is judging his father, whereas he claims that he is a good man. Compared to him, his father is not such a good man. So then Ram explains why he is criticizing his father. And he says, there is no peace when she, the stepmother, comes to the house. Something unfortunate is bound to happen. Our household is breaking apart. I say it would be better for her to go and live with her parents. Now, Ram must be really cross with his stepmother for whatever reason. Then Girindra, who is sitting there, now these conversations are going on, and like typical householders, another householder or another devotee is advising Ram. He says, why don't you keep your wife at her father's house in the same way? So all are laughing. So they're just trying to make a little fun. Because this topic, which ought to be a very private talk, a private conversation, is declaring these things in public. And Sri Ramakrishna also takes it very lightly and smiles and makes a joke. He says, are they like pots and pans, that the pot be here and the lid somewhere else? Shiva here and Shakti there? Is it possible? I mean, he's slowly turning the conversation to a spiritual topic. Now Ram has come, he has no business to discuss about how his father has married for the second time and there's so much of lack of peace in their home and he is not able to adjust. We do not know whose fault it is. But since Ram has introduced Sri Ramakrishna, Girindra of course just made a joke, and then Sri Ramakrishna also smiled and said, see, how is it possible that somebody marries and then you can't expect them to live separately just because you cannot adjust? Ram says, sir, we are living happily indeed. But somehow when she comes to the house, I mean the stepmother, family life falls apart. Otherwise, we were a very happy family. That is what he is claiming. Then Sri Ramakrishna gives, now what is the solution for this? Actually, he would not like to take this conversation further because this is a very rare occasion when such trivial family issues are being discussed. In gospel, you will never find all these things. He was only concerned, and only people who were genuinely interested in spirituality would come. In fact, you know, he jokingly Sri Ramakrishna used to say that a group of people came. Of course, one or two people were interested. And in those days, to come from Calcutta or to come from other parts of Bengal, you had to come by boat and cross. There was a ghat opposite Dakshineshwar, just near Dakshineshwar temple. And people used to hire a boat if they can afford it. A whole group would come, and all of them would come with different purposes. Some people used to come just to see the Dakshineshwar garden. Maybe like a picnic they used to come, but there were a few people who were genuinely interested in asking Sri Ramakrishna questions. And Sri Ramakrishna used to observe very carefully. The whole group would come and perhaps sit for some time, but then they would get bored with the spiritual conversation because their mind is elsewhere. And they would ask the people who are sitting there, because they have shared the boat, now they have to go back together. So they used to feel bored, many of them. And then they'll say, if you are interested, you continue here, we will go and wait for you in the boat. I mean, their minds were so restless that they could not even sit quietly and enjoy the conversation, whatever Sri Ramakrishna was discussing. Either they would come with some problems and seeing that, oh, this is not the place where we can discuss all these worldly issues. Because Sri Ramakrishna would very cleverly turn the conversation, change the conversation, so that they focused more on the essential things of life, which is to lead a God-centered life. That is all what he was interested in. No matter which sect you belong to, everybody was welcome. As long as he is faithful to his or her own concept of truth or reality or God, it was fine with him. And he would not mind talking about the different methods of worship. Different people used to come. The Sikhs used to come, the Vaishnavas used to come, Shaktas used to come, even some Christians used to come. So he enjoyed talking about various aspects of God as they are practiced in different religions and different sects within the Hindu religion. Though very often they clashed, many of the people did not get along well with each other. Brahmo Samaj, for example, if you see, Brahmo Samaj, even when Keshav Chandra Sen was alive, Brahmo Samaj was divided into two, and Vijay Krishna Goswami started another sect within Brahmo Samaj, which was known as Sadharan Brahmo Samaj. But you know that whenever Keshav came, they did not mind the other sect who would normally not talk to each other. They were totally different. They had started different organizations. There was a major difference of opinion between them. But when they came to Sri Ramakrishna, however, they somehow forgot all their differences. And they used to enjoy his company. But there were certain people who were allergic even to that. Not that they were atheists, but somehow their minds were too restless, and they thought, let us go and wait in the boat. And when you are done with this conversation, we can't sit here for long. They simply go. And Sri Ramakrishna used to smile because he knew that when the time is not right, I mean, when one is not prepared, then one does not have an inclination for such kind of talk. Then Sri Ramakrishna tells Ram, he was wondering, I mean, he was trying to tell that she can stay somewhere else, or Girindra was also suggesting. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, well, you can build a house for them elsewhere. There is another way. Give them their monthly expenses. You see, parents are big gurus. Rakhal once asked me whether he could eat from the same plate as his father had used. Then I said, what are you saying? What has happened to you that you can't eat from your father's plate? So he, in many cases, he did not like this holier than thou attitude. He used to look upon everybody with an equal eye. Said, why do you make such a distinction? Just because you have taken to spirituality doesn't mean that you have to look down upon other people. So he's giving a hint to Ram that no doubt you don't like your stepmother, but that doesn't mean that she is bad or your father is not good now as he used to be earlier. You have to adjust. Adjustment is life. But then But this is the fact. They who are real devotees do not give their leftover food to anyone, no, not even to dogs. So now the topic is changing. Worship the Guru as your ideal deity, the Guru not to be given up even if he is immoral. Now, Girindra, of course, this is an extreme case. Girindra is saying, sir, what if parents are guilty of some grave offense or that they have committed a very serious sin? So Sri Ramakrishna says, why should you bother about that? Let them, the mother, even if she is of easy virtue, should not be forsaken. When the woman guru of a certain family became immoral, it was said that her son be made the guru. I said, but why? You want to give up the yam and take the shoot. Even if she has gone wrong, what does it matter? You must take her as a guru. Now, this is an exception. Of course, Sri Ramakrishna would not advise one, he would advise discretion whenever it came to selection of a guru. But once you accept, he is quoting this verse from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, that it is not the person whom you consider as guru which is important. It's your devotion, it's your faith in God, faith in the name that is important. So he's saying, are parents such insignificant persons? No spiritual or other effort can be achieved if they are not pleased. Then he gives the example of Chaitanya Deva. He said Chaitanya was intoxicated with love for God. Yet before embracing sannyasa, he implored his mother for many days. He took her permission. We know even Shankaracharya had to plead with his mother and make arrangements for her, made provisions for her in his absence before, and once she agreed, then only he left his home and embraced monkhood or sannyasa. And Chaitanya also promised before taking sannyasa, he said, Mother, I will come every now and then to see you. So that is a tradition that just because one has renounced the world doesn't mean that the parents become you should not take care of, should not keep any contact with your parents. So Sri Ramakrishna himself, after taking sannyasa from Totapuri, till his mother was alive, he practically used to visit her. She was staying in Nahabat. As you all know, Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi used to stay below, and he used to go and eat till she was alive, till the last day. He used to keep in touch with her. He was God intoxicated and always busy with his sadhana, but in spite of that, he did not neglect his mother. So then to M, he is speaking to M now, and I tell you, your parents have reared you and you have so many children, yet you have left home with your wife and children. Leaving behind the father and mother, the Baul becomes a Vaishnava and comes away with his wife and son. Your father is well provided for. Were it not so, I would say shame on you. Everybody in the room is silent. M, you see, he is the recorder of this conversation and he is being criticized by Sri Ramakrishna, but he has recorded very faithfully whatever conversation took place, he has recorded. Here, you should remember there was another person, Hazra Mahashai, who used to come. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna had something else to say. When he came, he knew that he is avoiding. And once he reprimanded him, he said, you have children and your wife has gone and is staying with the children in her father's house. It's not good on your part to neglect them. Just because you want to do spiritual practices, since you have a family, you have to take care of them. Who will look after them? Is it a duty of her parents to look after your wife and children? You should go back. Of course, he tried very hard to convince him to go back, but Hajra was not going to listen. He was very stubborn. Anyway, but M was not as bad as Hajra. M was very devoted, but still he felt. You know how M came to Dakshineshwar. M actually wanted to commit suicide. We all know how this gospel has been recorded. It was M's friend Sidhu who once M was, they were in those days, they were staying in a joint family. Maybe his brother was there. We do not know exactly who all were staying in that house. It was a big house. And somehow his wife was also having some problems, some mental problems. She was a bit eccentric, and she was very difficult to deal with. So there were a lot of clashes in the house. And M had children also, Master Mahashay. But unfortunately, things took such a turn that they could not adjust. And he did not know what to do. For a few days, he went to live in his friend's house because the trouble was so much in their house. There was so much of quarrel going on. This is before he met Sri Ramakrishna. But then finally, one day he decided to commit suicide. The things were so bad in his house and he didn't know what to do. But his friend somehow convinced him, come, I'll take you to a nice place. Maybe a change of mood will, remove your depression. So he was so depressed that he was thinking of just jumping into the Ganga and taking his life, committing suicide. But he somehow agrees with his friend, and that was the first and the last time. As we all know, Sidhu came. Sidhu not only saved his life, but the immortal gospel that we are getting, the Ramakrishna Kathamrit. Because after the first meeting itself, M changed. And he changed so much that he started coming very regularly to Sri Ramakrishna. Not only did he not commit suicide, but his life changed totally. But still, Sri Ramakrishna is scolding him. He says, he is so frank that he is telling M, who has now, by now, this is 84. You should know that it's almost 2 years that he is regularly coming. So he says, just because your father is well provided for, I don't blame you. Otherwise, I would have said, shame on you. Whatever may be the difficulty, you should not have left him. So living behind the father and mother, the Baul becomes a Vaishnava and comes away. Baul is another Sampradaya, if you know, in Bengal. They are married people. All the Bauls are not minstrels. They are not monks. So these Bauls normally, they move with their entire family. Maybe the wife is also a singer. Whatever they get by begging, sometimes they beg for food. They just keep wandering from place to place. They are known as Bauls. So once the Bauls take up to this wandering life, they leave their family and just move from place to place singing the glory of God. That was a tradition in Bengal. Even today you will find this Baul Sampradaya. But he says, you have left home with your wife and children, because that was unavoidable. In the beginning, there was so much trouble in their house, maybe because of his own wife, who about whom M has mentioned here and there. He has mentioned because he was very much upset that she could not adjust, and naturally they had to leave. But Sri Ramakrishna is upset. He said, because his father is provided for, even though you have left with your wife and children and shifted to another place. He was the principal of Morton College, so he chose to stay near, and he found that it is easier to go to Dakshineshwar. But though he is a very great devotee, Sri Ramakrishna is taking this opportunity and indirectly telling Ram, who was there, who was upset with his stepmother, and because of lack of adjustment, they said, why can't she go and stay somewhere else? Or, that was the condition. So indirectly he was trying to convince him that that is not a good solution. M has to do it because of a particular reason, but since he has provided for his father, otherwise I would have blamed him and said, shame on you. So Sri Ramakrishna now is explaining. You have to remember, it is in this context he's saying, the context of M. Master Mahashay's household life. He says there are certain debts a man must pay. The debt to the deity, that is to God, debt to the Rishi. Rishi means all the scriptures that we have, the religious scriptures which we have inherited. So we have a debt to pay to them. Debt to the father, to the mother, and also to the wife. So for a householder, they say there are these 5 debts. It's part of Indian culture that these 5 debts remain for, especially for a householder. He has a debt to the deity whom he worships, debt to the rishi from whom he gets his spiritual sustenance, the scriptures, the ancient sages from whom he has inherited the spiritual truths, then to the father and mother who have given biological birth, and also to the wife. To the rishi means also it includes the guru from whom he has been trained in the spiritual tradition that he belongs to. Till you pay back the debt to your parents, he says, you can achieve nothing. He's addressing M, but indirectly is telling Ram also the same thing. Just because you don't like your father's behavior doesn't mean that you have to desert him. At least see to it that he's taken care of, or whatever you can do, you help him. You should not be so impatient or maybe so intolerant of your parents. Then he says you have to pay back the debt to the wife too. Harish has left his wife to live here. Had there been no provision for her, I would have called him a wicked person. So Harish, there were quite a few people who were in Dakshineshwar. There was a lot of provision, people could stay there, get some food, because Rani Rasmani was very charitable. So there was a Anna Satra or some kind of feeding house where people who avoided responsibilities and somehow had nobody to look after them, they would be fed along with the sadhus and pilgrims, anybody who came to the temple complex, Dakshineshwar temple complex. She was so generous that she had made provisions. There was an Anna Satra. So a lot of people took advantage. Hajra was one of them. He, instead of looking after his family, his wife and children had to live with her parents. And he came here in the name of practicing spirituality. So Sri Ramakrishna did not like that. He said, why should the parents of your wife look after her? You have been married to her. It's your duty to go back. And though he tried to convince him, like that, Harish's wife also was here. He had left somewhere, left his house, and that poor lady had to come here to beg for alms and live. But then I think he had made some provisions so that she at least could get something. Then he changes the topic now. There was enough discussion about the duties towards parents and all these household issues which he did not like. But still, because the topic was introduced and Ram was complaining about his own stepmother, Sri Ramakrishna thought that he should, at least in this case, he wanted him to be more kind to his father. And then he says, then he suddenly changes the topic. He says, when you have attained jnana, you look upon your wife as the embodiment of Bhagavati, Divine Mother. The Chandi says, Chandi is a scripture also known as Devi Mahatmya. The divine power dwells in all elements in the form of the mother. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Matru Rupena Sanstita. So mother lives, the idea here is Prakriti is considered to be mother in the Indian tradition. So it's not just in the feminine that this motherhood of God has to be worshipped. Motherhood of God implies that anything that is created is a form of the divine mother. So the divine power as Shakti, as mother, resides in all the elements. So she herself has become your mother. All women are manifestations of the divine mother. So I cannot scold Brinde. There was a maid servant who used to come and clean. She was employed by the temple authorities. And that is why I said, because I respect womanhood, I can't scold Brinde, though she was very of a bossy nature. Many times she used to speak very harsh words. She was, after all, just an employee of the temple, and she used to come and clean. Seeing many devotees there, she used to sometimes shout at the devotees, and she did not like if her work was obstructed by the crowd of devotees who assembled every day. So she was very short-tempered. But Sri Ramakrishna treated her with utmost respect. And in fact, he used to be so careful that uh, after cleaning and other things, this old lady who used to be very short tempered. But Sri Ramakrishna was so kind to her. See, here he tells the reason. I cannot scold Brinde because all women are manifestations of the Divine Mother. So he used to keep some luchi and some payas for her. And if it was not there, Sri Ramakrishna used to be very upset. He used to send somebody, see, Brinde's food has to be given to her. And he used to take so much of care even of the servant maid who was employed by the temple authorities. Then he says, and he's quoting from the scriptures. He said the scriptures say that you should respect women, but people just behave exactly the opposite. He says some people recite verse after verse from scriptures and talk big, but they act quite the opposite. Ram Prasanna is arranging for milk and opium for that Hatha yogi. He said Manu talks of service to the sadhus. On the other hand, his old mother hasn't enough to eat. She has to go to the bazaar herself. When I see this, I feel so annoyed. So he didn't like this kind of uh, false spirituality where you neglect your own people and try to go out of the way to serve other people. First, look after your own mother. So he is giving all these examples and hinting to Ram that first adjust with your own family, your own father, whatever may be his nature. He might have married for the second time for some reason, but that doesn't mean you should hate him. So first take care of, he says, this Ram Prasanna, he was going after these wandering monks, giving them milk and whatever they want, and his own mother was starving. If he had fed his mother and looked after his comforts, then it is okay, he can serve anybody he wants. That's why he says, I feel annoyed. Annoyed. Now, the next topic is, who is free from all these debts? A sannyasi and his duties. But then this is also specifically true. Then he is saying, this what I have said now is for a person who has already involved himself in the world. But are there not exceptions to this rule? So he says, but in some cases, if a person feels intoxicated with God's love, then there is no mother, no father, no wife for him. I mean, if somebody, he may have so much love for the Lord that he may appear to the ordinary people to be mad. Such a person only has no duties. All others, if they don't perform their duties, they should be treated as hypocrites, as Ram was trying to do, as even he told him, if you are not provided for, but if you are really intoxicated, because in Buddha's life we see, Buddha renounced the world, he had a wife, he had a child, and he left the kingdom very quietly at night. But that was because his love for truth or his love for God was so much. He says, there is so much love for the Lord that he may appear to all the worldly people to be mad. Such a person, if he has really that kind of yearning or desire to attain the Lord, then he is free from all the duties. There are no duties for him. What is intoxication of love for God like? One really forgets the world. You see, others whom he is referring to were hypocritical. They were not done with the world. They had attachments, they had all the they were attached to their family and many things were there. And at the same time, they did not have genuine or real love for God. For such people, Sri Ramakrishna would say, no, you first perform your duties. When you really feel a yearning for God, more than that, more than the love you feel for the world and its things, then you can renounce, then you don't have duties. Till then, if anybody neglects his duties, he is a hypocrite. So even Arjuna, you find in the war, when Sri Krishna was advising him, because Arjuna had come prepared for a war. They had all assembled in front because it was a just war, of course. They were deprived of their kingdom and he had come to fight a war. And all of a sudden, after hearing the first chapter or after hearing Sri Krishna's message, he said, you are confusing me. If that is the greatest ideal, to reach Atman, Brahman, or spirituality is the highest ideal, then why are you engaging me to fight this battle? I would like to just give up this and go to the forest and live like a recluse. But Sri Krishna says, even if you want to, you can't, because that would be hypocritical. Because your mind is attached to these things. You have come here with a mind full of revenge to fight this battle, a just battle, no doubt, but still your mind is yearning, hankering for victory, and you are a trained warrior. Now you cannot suddenly give up, because your gunas, the gunas that you have, will not allow you to lead a life of meditation in the forest or in seclusion. Even if you go to seclusion, you will carry all the anger and all the worldly tendencies with which you have assembled here for the battle. That will go with you. So you can't just avoid all these things. You have to fight this in a spirit of detachment. And when your karma is over, perhaps a day might come when you'll really understand the importance of solitude, and perhaps then you can take up the life of meditation. So he says, you will be free from debts only if you are intoxicated with love for God. And then he says, what is the love for love? What is intoxication with love for God like? It is in that state one forgets the world. Even one forgets one's body that is so dear. Chaitanya Deva, that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, had this state. He jumped into the sea unaware that it was a sea. He would fall hard on the ground again and again. He lost hunger, thirst, and sleep. He was not at all conscious of this body. This lack of body consciousness is one sign that one is ready for the highest devotion or the highest love for God. They don't care. Even Jesus, for example, he did not care whether he was crucified or not. He even forgave all his enemies. He did not expect, because he had got rid of that body consciousness. People who really believe in the kingdom of God, as Jesus said in the Bible, the kingdom of God is within you. That love for the spirit is so strong that it really doesn't matter whether the body lives or goes. That is how these great prophets, these great spiritual leaders, they believe really in the supremacy of the spirit as against the body. It is a very rare state. So Sri Ramakrishna is cautioning these people, unless you have that kind of love for God, don't think you can avoid your duties. You have to do your duties. You can't have, as Jesus said, you can't have God and mammon at the same time. You want the world and yet you want God. That cannot go. Either you have to, you can still yearn for God, but then you can't leave everything. Your connection to the world, unless you have got rid of the feeling that you are the body, unless the world really matters, the material world really does not matter to you at all, you are totally detached, then only you have no duties. Then suddenly Sri Ramakrishna says, now the elder Gopal, that is Budo Gopal, who he was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. In fact, he was older than Sri Ramakrishna in age. So he is going on a pilgrimage. Sri Ramakrishna is present, but he says, why do you want to go on a pilgrimage? He is already old. He was older than Sri Ramakrishna. And then Sri Ramakrishna's thoughts on meditation, that is the new subheading. Thakur suddenly says, because he referred to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then he suddenly says, Chaitanya, to the devotees, was this Chaitanya, he who was indivisible Chaitanya. Chaitanya has two meanings. One is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Chaitanya in the Vedantic sense means pure consciousness. So man is made of consciousness and the other things that attach to him, that is inertness, that is jada. So there are two things according to Vedanta in this whole creation. One is the Prakriti or the jada Prakriti, which is jada means it is inert. It has no consciousness of its own. And behind that Prakriti is the consciousness, which is known as Chaitanya. So Vaishnava Charan used to say, Vaishnava Charan was a a great devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and also a preacher. So Gauranga is a bubble of the same indivisible consciousness. So according to Vedanta, consciousness is indivisible, but it appears to be divided in different animals. The great Sufi mystic once said, this is a very important poem. I don't know the original Sufi poem, but this idea was there in other religions as well. Sufi is a wonderful blend of Islam and Christian and Hinduism, Vedanta. So one Sufi mystic, he was asked, because according to Vedanta, according to all religions, in fact, spirit is primary, matter is secondary. So somebody asked him, why do you worship these stones? Why do people worship an image? He says, I don't see anything which does not have consciousness. So the famous Sufi mystic said, consciousness is inert in a stone, in inanimate objects. In a stone, it is inert. It is there, but it is not manifesting itself. In the plant, which is stationary, but at the same time it is growing, he says consciousness is quivering. Quivering means there is some semblance of consciousness which you can feel. You know the tree is conscious, but it is not conscious enough to move. It grows, it does all the functions of a living being, the vegetable kingdom. And then he says, in the animal, the Sufi mystic says, consciousness is there everywhere, even in the stone, but in the stone it is static. In the tree or in the plants, it is quivering. And in the animals and human beings, it is very dynamic. So this idea of a unified consciousness, in fact, the scientists also try their best. They tried everywhere you find the quest for a scientific truth begins with generalization. When Newton observed different objects falling down, he wanted to formulate an idea which he called the theory of gravitation. Then we had other theories which explained magnetism, electricity, electromagnetism, light, sound. There were so many energies which scientists saw around them. So a true scientific quest was a quest for unity. They said, is there some unified force? We see force everywhere, sometimes as light, sometimes as, and they are interchangeable. Light gives rise to heat, the electricity can be converted into other forces. And then there are small nuclear forces, weak nuclear forces. There are so many forces have been discovered. So the quest in quantum physics is this quest after some kind of unity. Man is not satisfied till he gets a universal law, unified field, or unified force. They want to reduce everything to one force, all the matter to one something. That search for unity is what the sages, the Vedanta does in the field of spirit. They are not satisfied with individual spirits. So, according to these Vaishnavas, the indivisible consciousness, no doubt it is indivisible, like the ocean. But the wave, when it is there, it appears to have a separate consciousness, a separate identity. But when the wave merges with the ocean, there is one undivided consciousness. The wave may be big or may be small, but behind them is the vast ocean. So Gauranga is just a bubble. All these incarnations and all these saints, according to our scriptures, they say they are just bubbles, big waves maybe. We are smaller waves, they are bigger waves. But behind them is this indivisible consciousness, which is the unitary consciousness, whom we can call as Brahman or call him by any name. Then Sri Ramakrishna is asking Buddha Gopal, who was Elder Gopal, who wanted to go on a pilgrimage. Do you intend to go on a pilgrimage? The Elder Gopal says, yes, sir, I may visit some places. Then he tells Ram was still sitting there. Now he's telling Elder Gopal, he says that one becomes a kuti chaka after being a bahudaka. Bahudaka means one who drinks. Literally, it is a Sanskrit word. Bahu means many. Udaka means water. So one person who is always traveling will drink water from different places. So Sanskrit is a beautiful language. Bahudaka means one who is always wandering. He doesn't drink water from the same source. Whereas a person, kuti chaka means he's fixed. He doesn't move. He doesn't like to travel. That means he drinks water from the same source. Whereas bahudaka means he likes to wander, and as a result, he has to take a water from different places. So sadhu who visits many holy places is known as bahudaka. One who doesn't desire to move around, who settles down peacefully at one place on an asana, is known as kutichaka. Then he gives a wonderful example, which Sri Ramakrishna was famous. All these great spiritual giants, including Buddha, they taught through parables. They did not teach philosophy. If you see the gospel, after every teaching or after every idea that he gives an example from nature. That is why Swami Vivekananda said, I appreciate my master because he was the original person. I went to the university and I consider myself as a lesser person because I studied only second-hand knowledge. Knowledge that I gained from my predecessors, the books, the texts, and the professors and all the teachers. They taught what they learned from somebody else. So we have just parroted what we were taught. We just parroted things which others had thought, and then it was given to us saying that so and so person has said this, he has said that, and we just remembered that and appeared for examinations and passed. So my university, Swami Vivekananda is saying that I pride myself that I am a graduate of the Calcutta University, but sometimes I feel that my master was more original than I was, because he never went to school or university, but he learned from the University of Nature. Nature, Prakriti taught him lessons. Everything that he saw, he learned something from it. And that is why he was far, far original and wiser than me. So here is one example. Everybody watches birds flying, and in those days they had these ships which used masts. They had to depend on wind. They did not have motor boats and other things. So they depended a lot on this mast and the wind. The sails had to be properly adjusted so that they could take advantage of the wind and the boats could move. So Sri Ramakrishna, he stayed very near the sea. I mean, not sea, but at least boats used to come inside. The sea was not very far from Dakshineshwar or Hooghly. So you used to see boats, some sail, the boats with large sails. So perhaps he had seen these things, and immediately that gave a wonderful idea. He says, a bird was sitting on the mast of a ship. And then he says, he did not know when the ship came out of the holy Ganga and entered the black waters of the ocean. Perhaps the bird was taking rest, and the ship went far into the sea. And then suddenly the bird realized, when it became aware of the ocean, it wanted to know where the land was. Unfortunately, the ship had gone far deep into the sea. Flying to the north and finding no shore, it returned. Then it took some rest. Then it went towards the south, as far as it could. Then it was tired and thought, let me go back. At least the mast is there. I can rest there. But here I'm not seeing land anywhere. Then it flew to the west and to the east, and resting a while on the same mast. When it found land or shore nowhere, it perched peacefully on the mast, said, at least I'm sure of this. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna says, as long as one thinks. Now you see how he is coming to the idea that spiritual quest begins with a God who is outside. Some people say he's in heaven, some people say he is here, he is in the temple, he is in the church, he is in the mosque. But finally you have to discover him within. That is the idea. So with such a beautiful example, he says, he's addressing Elder Gopal, who wanted to go on pilgrimage. He said, as long as you think that the Lord is there, if I go to Dwaraka or if I go to some holy place, I can get the Lord there. As long as you think that the Lord is somewhere there, one is ignorant because he doesn't know. But when one thinks that the God is definitely here, that is known as jnana. So he's discouraging him in some way, that all the scriptures, all the religious leaders, as Jesus said famously, he spoke of the Father in heaven, but at the same time, to some of his very close disciples, he said, the kingdom of God is within you. So he spoke of a kingdom of God. Was it outside? No, it was within. So all the spiritual leaders, all the spiritual giants, they always spoke of one thing we can find everywhere. One common thing, that the Lord is within. The discovery of the spirit has to be within. Even in the Kathopanishad. So when one thinks that God is definitely here, that is Jnana. So he's telling this elder Gopal that you may go there, but ultimately the God whom you are searching outside has to be discovered within. Till you do that, it really does not matter how much you travel, where you go. So then he gives another beautiful example. This is also taken from our day-to-day, from the day-to-day incidents that happen every day. He has seen this in his village. He says somebody wanted a smoke. He went to his neighbor's home to get a light. It was quite late at night, so the neighbors were all asleep. When he had knocked for a long time, somebody came. Perhaps he was a bit drunk, otherwise he would not behave like this. When he had knocked for a long time, somebody came downstairs to open the door. And seeing the caller, he asked, what is the matter? The farmer said, nothing more than this. I am addicted to smoking. Or maybe he had smoked a little more and he was not aware. And he says, I am addicted to smoking. You already know about that. So I have come here for light. And then the man said, you are a fine man indeed. You have taken all the trouble to come here and knocked so long and disturbed my sleep. But don't you see you have a lantern in your hand? And all laugh. So Sri Ramakrishna was pointing out that the divinity is within, but ignorantly we search for that same divinity outside, and that is our folly. So through these wonderful examples, the first is the bird sitting on the mast, that unless you are tired, of course the quest begins. Spiritual quest begins when we try to find that God without. But because our human personality is designed in such a way, as the Kathopanishad says, we are all extroverts. Right from childhood, the child is an introvert, but as it grows, we make him extrovert. And he loses that divine vision. That is what Swamiji says. We make him so engrossed in the world outside that he forgets there is a world inside. What man desires is already within him, yet he wanders from place to place. So in a way, he's telling this Buddha Gopal that you are already old now. He was quite old when he came to Sri Ramakrishna. Now don't waste your time going on pilgrimage here and there. Half your time used to make fun. Half your time will be spent in trying to find a lodging and where will I stay. And then finally, when you are comfortable, you hardly get time to see the deity or the place, enjoy the place of pilgrimage where you had gone. Instead of that, you sit here and try to meditate in the heart, within the heart, and you can find God easily. So what man desires is already within him, yet he wanders from place to place. Is Thakur hinting that he is present there? Why then go on pilgrimage? So Ram says, sir, now I understand why the Guru asked some disciples to visit all the 4 dhamas. Dhamas means in Hinduism, there are these 4 holy places, north, south, east and west. In the north is Badrikashram, in the west is Dwarka, in the east is Puri, and in the south is, of course, there is Kanyakumari, but there are Sringeri. Sringeri is the place. So we have these 4 places where Shankaracharya has established mutts. So there is a desire in everyone to visit these 4 places in the east, west, north, and south. So then he says, there is, Ram is telling, Ram who was listening to this conversation, now I know why they have created these 4 places. When he goes from place to place, and sees what he sees here is what he sees there. Then finally he returns to his guru. So the guru says, okay, just like that bird, you just go all the four sides, because unless one experiences that truth that God is within, one will not believe. These places of pilgrimage is just to tire your wings, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. The bird realized only after its wings got tired. It could fly no more. Then it thought, what am I doing? I'm going east, going west, going north. And finally, he had to settle on the top of the mast, which was the safest place. So all this is done so that the disciple may have firm faith in the words of the Guru. So that is how the Vedantic gurus train their disciples, that first you have an experience of the world, whatever you want. Only when you are fully convinced that that divinity is within, then only your spiritual quest will begin. So when the conversation stops, Sri Ramakrishna praises Ram, and no doubt he was scolding him a while ago, because now Ram is slowly uh, he has started talking, is getting himself involved. Perhaps he has forgotten his stepmother, the problems that is the advantage of satsang. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, now and then you have to leave your house and just come. So either you go to solitude or go to a person where you can get some holy company. So this is the advantage of holy company. And Ram is, yeah. So Ram is telling the devotees now, that same person who was a little while ago, he was saying, my stepmother is so bad too, and my father was such a nice person. Now because of her, they have she has created so much of commotion in the house, and now he has totally changed. See the impact of Sri Ramakrishna's company. He is now joined the conversation, and he is understanding Sri Ramakrishna's parable, and he says, then Ramakrishna, now in the beginning he was admonished, but now he is telling the devotees. Sri Ramakrishna was very quick to even praise somebody who, maybe because of some emotion, he was in a very bad mood. But as soon as he started understanding the deeper spiritual truth, Sri Ramakrishna also does not fail to appreciate. He tells the devotees, oh, what good qualities Ram has. How he serves devotees and looks after them. To Ram, Adar told me that you were very hospitable to him. Adar's house, Adar Sen was a great devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, and his house was sanctified by Sri Ramakrishna, just as Balram Bose's house, he went almost 100 times, they say. And today is Jagannath Rath Yatra. So he used to go every year as far as possible and pull the Rath in his house, Balram Bose's house. It is a very sacred place of pilgrimage now in the Ramakrishna order. His house was the only house where Sri Ramakrishna has gone at least 100 times. That is what he said. But Adar Sen was also another, he was a deputy magistrate, and his house, which is still there in Calcutta, it is in Shobha Bazar area of Calcutta. So Adar's house is in Shobha Bazar. He is a great devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. The Chandi was sung at his house. Thakur and a number of devotees were present, but Adhar had forgotten to invite Ram. And Ram is a very proud man. No doubt Ram was a great devotee, but at the same time, he was a man full of ego. Ram is a very proud man. He told some of his friends of his displeasure at this negligence, because he felt that Adar should have invited me. So Adar went, so noble of him, he went to Ram's house to apologize that somehow I did not invite you. But Ram says, Adar is not to be blamed. I've learned that it was Rakhal's mistake. Rakhal was given that responsibility, somehow he forgot. So anyway, now Ram has changed. So Sri Ramakrishna says, you must not find fault with Rakhal. You can bring up mother's milk by pressing his throat. That means that is a saying that he's so mild and so nice that if you just press his throat, whatever milk he has taken, it's just a figurative way of saying, means he is a fairly young and immature person. Don't blame him. He is very childish. He has a childlike disposition, so maybe he has forgotten. Don't take it seriously. Then Ram says, sir, they say that the Chandi was sung there in Adar's house. Sri Ramakrishna says, Adar didn't know about that. Just see, the other day he accompanied me to Jadu Mallik's house. When we were leaving, I asked him why he had not offered pranami, offering of money to the deity, to Mother Simhavahini. He replied, sir, I didn't know that I was supposed to offer pranami. Even if one is not invited, I mean, Sri Ramakrishna is giving this example, telling him that you don't need an invitation. If something good is going on, if some satsang is going on, even if you are not invited, you should not have that kind of pride in you that if I'm not invited, it's not a social gathering. You could have just come. Even if one is not invited, what is wrong with going to the place where Hari's name is sung? So Sri Ramakrishna used to say in Bengali, Lajja Grina Bhoy, Teen Thakte Noy, and that is a colloquial Bengali. Lajja means shame. Don't be overtly cautious or have that sense of shame that what will people think, I am not invited. If you really love the Lord, if where Hari's name is sung, you should give up Lajja. Grina means some kind of hatred, and bhai, fear. These three things are not good for spiritual life. One should go even uninvited wherever the name of Hari is being chanted. There is no need for an invitation. So the next topic, yeah, we have just a few minutes. I'll not start this topic. If there are some questions, you can ask. The conversation is this new chapter. I'll just read out the chapter. And Sri Ramakrishna is with devotees at Dakshineshwar and attends a performance of Chaitanya at Calcutta. The conversation is about Rakhal, Narayan, Nitya Gopal, and younger Gopal, Choto Narayan. So these were all very close devotees. They were all very young devotees, and Sri Ramakrishna liked them a lot. The date is Sunday, 21st September 1884, the 6th day of Ashwin. The Bengali year is 1291, 1291 Bengali year. A number of devotees have gathered in Sri Ramakrishna's room. Ram, Mahendra Mukherjee, Chunilal was a very devotee of very humble means. And Sri Ramakrishna loved him so much that whenever the rich devotees came in a carriage or something, he knew Chunilal had to walk all the way, and he did not mind walking miles to have satsang whenever he was free. And he was a man of very poor means. So Chunilal Bose, whenever Chuni came, Sri Ramakrishna, though he was in ecstasy talking about God, he never forgot to request one of the rich people who had come in a carriage, why don't you take Chuni with you? So Thakur was very fond of him because he knew that he used to come, travel a lot, and had to walk a lot even to attend these functions. And whenever Thakur went to Kolkata, Balram Bose, which was nearer to him, he used to come. And otherwise, if he somehow managed to come to Dakshineshwar, Sri Ramakrishna would make it sure that somebody took him back, and he accompanied them. M and many others. Chunilal has just returned from Vrindavan. He and Rakhal went there with Balram. In fact, even many times he knew Chunilal was a very devoted Vaishnava. So he used to ask sometimes Balram Bose, who never refused, why don't you just take him to Vrindavan? He cannot afford. So perhaps he had gone there with Rakhal and Balram. Rakhal and Balram have not yet returned, but Chunilal has come back. Nitya Gopal is also in Vrindavan. Thakur talks of Vrindavan and Chunilal. Sri Ramakrishna is asking. Now the conversation goes on. We will not continue because it's a long conversation. So I'll conclude today. It's almost, what's the time? Yeah, it's 8:05. So there are a few questions. Just a minute. Yeah. How do sadhakas reconcile the need to reduce attachments with the attachment one feels for one's own atmosphere and routine of the ashrama or home? I am very far from sadhu, wandering sadhu spirit. No, that is what was the topic of today's discussion. Sri Ramakrishna was very sympathetic. As you see, he said whenever possible, Maje Maje used to say Nirjan Vas. Nirjan Vas was not for everybody. That's why he said, can you do it for 3 days? If you can't do it for 3 days, even he said, for one day, can you come? That is how M started coming. M was such a busy person. He was very busy. He was not a wandering monk. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna is admonishing him. He said, if you had not taken care of your father and you had left the home with your wife and children, you know, he left his home because he could not tolerate. Every day there was some problem, maybe because of his slightly eccentric wife. Now, there was a lot of problems he had to face, to the extent that he wanted to commit suicide. So even in those circumstances, he obeyed Sri Ramakrishna's advice to householders. In fact, during his second meeting itself, he said, what is the way for us householders? He didn't say you come away. He said, can you come for 3 days? If you go, he sometimes towards the end of his Sri Ramakrishna's life, M used to sometimes stay here, though he had a family. But you see, he's admonishing Ram and other people. He said, no, if first make provisions for, if they are dependent on you, you just can't come and stay here. In fact, Hajra also, as I mentioned, Hajra, his wife and children were looked after by his in-laws, that is the girl's father. So he said, that is not good. You have a responsibility, you fulfill it, make some provision for them. And then if the love for God is really, you have intense love, then it is acceptable. Otherwise, it is hypocritical. So there is no question of reconciling here. The question that you have asked is, it is very difficult for householders. Obviously, it is difficult. You can't have that spirit of a wandering monk. The bowls, as I said, they used to go with their family. It's not that the bowls left their family and went. Thakur says very clearly, the Vaishnava bowls, of course, they leave their parents and some of them may be depending on them. In that case, Thakur did not encourage that. But if they were well looked after, there was a tradition, one can move. That's why he's giving concession. He's telling M. So M literally followed that. Whenever he had a holiday, he used to somehow come. If he could, he could. He preferred to stay there. Sri Ramakrishna made arrangement for his stay also. But at least he was trying. Even if he got half a day, he somehow managed to come. So if there is a will, there is no problem. But that doesn't mean that one has to have that wandering spirit. It's just a mental attitude that is important. It's not that one has to take it literally. Yeah. I think the questions are over. I mean, there are no further questions. I'll take your leave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.